Well, my paper that I'm going to go through with you today is about foreign influence in the Philippine context. It's very important for me to put that in the Philippine context and transcending cultural differences in imaging the Catholic faith. Yesterday, as I was going home, I was reflecting on the past days and all the speakers and the topics we have heard. I felt like a child viewing a kaleidoscope. Different patterns emerging with each movement. All kinds of possibilities that can come up from the interrelationship of the data that have been presented to us in the past few days. So thank you to the Getty Research Institute, to the Ayala Museum, and to the rest of the cast and our audience for bringing us together, and for me, for my participation in this particular symposium. I am listed as an independent scholar, and as such, I have decided to free myself from the restriction of the time frame 1781 or 1869, the privilege of old age. I pushed the timeline to the 16th century because if the intention were to see how ideas, influences had been transferred from one culture to another, then one should get to the earliest time of contact. That is the time one sees people separated clearly by drawn lines. Though placed at a disadvantage, the indigenous people are not without options to assert themselves. Often, we have seen dominant ideas or elements in the indigenous cultures grafted onto the culture of colonizing powers. Particularly in crafting religious images, whether ivory or wood, we find many examples of this without the colonizers being aware that they themselves were being conditioned to accept certain things. For instance, crafting a santo hair might be a very simple word on top of the head, but it projects a symbol. It's like a subliminal message being sent to us because the viewer, the indigenous people, they understand the meaning. But the colonials or the rich people who were commissioning the product do not understand what had been placed there. So it's a kind audi corpus, political economist had written something about this, and he said that it's like preserving, it's the people's way of preserving part of their own culture so it doesn't die. They project themselves into what they're doing. In formulating this paper, I actually worked on the context of regional trade, not so much of the transatlantic trade, because as it has been brought up, it was just transmittal point. But in the trade, the regional trade, the country trade, however you may want to call it, there is such an interplay of exchanges that has been there. The pattern of trade has been there from ever since, even in prehistoric times. So that the transfer of influences and exchanges of ideas happen quite naturally and selectively on the part of the locals. They just took what they want. And as always, as Gordon Child had said, mostly trade for some reason always provide you with what you do not need in life. They're all luxury items. So what we saw today being projected, the biombos, the writing desks, the screens and whatnot that came out. Past year, Fray Medina wrote about it. Being here in the Philippines, I've seen some documents in the archives that list Japanese cabinets. And you start realizing, what are all this? Who are using these things? Because obviously not everything was shipped out. When I saw her big, the red porcelain vases that you saw, what came to my mind, oh lovely, but kinalabasa. We have a term for that, for a similar kind of pottery with low designs, and we call it kinalabasa. It's pre-colonial ware. So all of these things coming together, we are really looking at something beyond shipping. The interrelationship of the traders, what went on between the Portuguese, the English, the Armenians, the Indians. Actually, I was hoping to hear more about it from our Indian colleague, but the trade of the Malabar Coast, Coromandel, Goa, that was very, very important, and the source of ivory. Because at that time, China, as I understand it, around the Ming times, they were really buying ivory from outside. And to think that they are shipping it to the Philippines, it was not quite as an open market trade, but more of, I think, clandestine. Because if you look at what had been said, for instance, Morgan said ivory went in the galleon trade. He said so, no list. Someone else said, William Short says, the galleon trade, ivory went there, came from Africa and Cambodia. Again, no offer of a list of actual bill of lading. And a lady in Yuste Lopez from Mexico did a very good compilation of the trade that happened between Mexico and the Philippines. And again, she mentioned so many items. Ivory, maybe, but again, no bill of lading. And she says, the thing is, many things that go to Acapulco went by, how the modern term for that, I think, is consigned. You had somebody in Manila who did not get a permit to export. They asked the captain, they asked the sailors, they asked anybody, the passengers, to take things for them and sell them. Apparently it happened very often during the time. So those are things that went on, and that is why for us here in the Philippines, we have a hard time dating anything that involves ivory. Because even Morgan says this, but he doesn't mention ever carved Santos, carved images that went out. So the parallel experiences, however, we have to look at from the point of view of the Philippines and Goa, because we were both colonialized and we have been evangelized. So, from the point of view of those who were evangelizing, a superior attitude in a sense, you would call that. There was King King John III, and he instructs the governor, see to it that the Hitans, quote unquote, do not carve, do not paint, do not peddle the images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints. So, who carved those images? Okay, and what were they talking about? What kind of images, how do they look? In the Philippines, you have a parallel experience, but differently, and we will be going to Canton and Jiangsu, do I pronounce that correctly, in Fujian, where there will again be these interchanges, and it will be very pronounced, but later on will dissipate. We are, at least I would count myself lucky because I have been given permission to show only for room use, please, some artifacts that were found in the wreckage of Santa Margarita, which sailed in the Philippines in 1600. And in 1600, you know, the storms and all that, it sank off Guam, and first it was beach. And after 8 months, it again drifted out into the sea and finally sank off Rota Island. 20 minutes? Okay. Super. Okay, so that is the the Santo Niño and the Nuestra Señora de Guía. They reigned supreme. They were our first prototypes. Why am I saying that? For the Santo Niño, it was supposed to have been brought by Magellan here in 1521. And by consensus, yes it is. We agree that it is the same image. However, when Magellan left, they stripped him of his clothes, used him as an anito. So again, well, my anthropologist friend will say, what has now been taken and used for that, a different purpose, belongs now to these people. So they had appropriated the Santo Niño for their own use. When there is no rain and they want it to rain, they offer sacrifices to him, but when it does not rain, they put him in the sea. That's documented. They dunk him in the sea, I don't know for how long, but he has survived, because after that, when it's okay again, they put oil on him, put offerings before him, until the Spaniards found him back in 1565. When they took him away, they were saying, the Cebuanos were saying, give us back our anito, that it belongs to us. But no, the Spaniards took them away, and you have a parallel experience here with this wooden image of the Nuestra Señora de Guía. She was given that name, but she was just there found in a bower of pandan leaves, being worshipped. So we do not know who she is, what she is, or what, but obviously she is venerated. Then again, the Spaniards took her, recognizing in her an image of the Virgin. So you have this cross exchanges, people appropriating one from the other, and the other, up to actually before the war. I don't know if Mr. Ligarda can correct me about this. This was in Intramuros, and the people of Ermita, where she was found, had been working to get her back. So we now have a beautiful fiesta of having the transfer from Intramuros to Ermita called Bota de Flores. So now our earliest influences, where images are concerned, come from these two people, because Salazar will be often quoted by everyone who had written about the Philippines in the context of Santos. And Cedeño, who was supposed to have taught Chinese traders. They were not artists, but during the lull, when they missed the boat going, the season for going home, they stayed behind, and rather than being idle, Cedeño took them, maybe a kind of workshop that he set up, but anyway, he had taught them. And Chirino says he taught them how to paint the images of the Virgin Mother and the other saints, but what was in the houses and the churches made by these people were all of the Virgin Mother's image. So, but still, how do they look like? We have no idea until this wreck was found, and because it was it left, the galleon left Manila in 1600. We have now a time frame where we can project the development of the images and how more or less the rest would look like. So, okay. So this is Salazar giving us an indication of what he meant. The Sangle knew how to paint anything. You can read, right? I don't know my glasses. Now they have perfected themselves in this art, that they have produced marvelous work with both brush and the chisel. And I think nothing more perfect can be produced than some of the ivory statues of the child Jesus, which I have seen. This opinion is affirmed by all who have seen them. The churches are beginning to be furnished with images that the assemblies make and which we greatly lacked before, and considering the ability of display by this in reproducing the images which come from España, I believe soon we shall not even miss those made in Flanders. So, the reason I read this aloud is I'd like you to keep it in your mind for a while, because we're going back there again. It will be read differently by a British scholar. So, okay, I will be showing you artifacts from the wreck of the galleon Santa Margarita. And it will more or less show you. I'm sorry it's not any better. Oh, that's it. Now this, I would like to the source of influence here is the Indian Buddhism. In Buddhism, that symbolizes something else. You see, there is a legend, an Indian Indian legend about the Buddha. He was such a compassionate soul that he was sitting one day, he forgot that the sun was so hot, and you know, his head is clean shaven, so he was just sitting there, and the snails around him took pity on him. He'll get a heat stroke, I guess that's what they meant. So that they crept up on him and covered his head to cool him down. That is the source of the image. The curly hair from Indo-Buddhism. So it's almost that this is like a leap of faith I would like you to take. But this is supposed to be both the Santo Niño again from the Buddhist image. You still have him there with the curly locks, but seated posture, meditating. This will be developed in Goan imagery, and we will progress from there. This is still part of Santa Margarita. Here you see, there is now a change, and you're moving away from the naked child to a figure that is actually clothed. Here the change is cross-legged, right? Long hair, but here we do not know. I don't think he was posing this way. But it's just a seated figure, and this will now come from Sino-Buddhism, the influence. What will be, you will have to watch out for what will happen there. Thank you. This is from the same wreck. And here you will see a part. And only here will you see the lock of hair curled in the same manner. But cloth now, having the Christian symbol of the orb, the cross has obviously been lost. Cross-legged and posed in this manner. Those previous images will make metaphors into what they call the Good Shepherd or the Bon Pastor. And you will see here the same posture, the curly locks. This is supposed to be the sheep, and then you have the crossed legs. In a later times, you have everything there, but additional vignettes will come in. Here, it's not shown here, but in other, I think one of you showed a slide with niches, and there will be different figures there representing the symbols of related to Christ. In the first image I showed you, I forgot to point out, the Niño was stepping on a skull. That is very distinctive of this area, Goa, because it's supposed to be the skull of Adam and part of the resurrection and redemption motifs. The blood of Christ flowing down to his leg, down to the skull, representing mankind. Which here, in this context now, you will have Magdalene the penitent. She will be part of this imagery. And this is specifically Indo-Luso imagery. We don't have that kind of ivory development here in the Philippines, but the same imagery will come out here. The seated figure, the lamb, although he's headless here, and the Bodhi tree under which the Buddha was supposed to be sitting under. And you see there a very stylized tree. In later development of the same Bon Pastor and the Goanese tradition, this will now become almost like woven palm leaves. So that will be its final stage of development. We go back to Salazar and his images. Again, we go back to Indian tradition here of Buddhism, where it was very important to think of the king as a rich person, so fat is in, the paunch is in, and they were saying that this is a 6th century document from India. Kings have rounded legs and excellent thighs, similar to an elephant's trunk, and fleshy knees. Kings have elevated middle parts of the belly. That's a nice way of putting it. Elevated middle parts of the belly. One whose neck is marked with 3 folds like a shell is a king. So there it is. And the 3 marks in the neck, the low ears, the fleshy thighs will enter into the Philippine tradition. So, now this is from the Gallion Red also. The slides I have here are very good. I'm sorry to put it. You hardly see anything here, but this is unusual at a very early time that you have this solidad. What will distinguish this from others will be the way the skirt folds. You remember our Degia, always on the side you will like have a V-cut. And that will go on and on in the images of the Blessed Virgin, whether in wood or in ivory. So we have little insidious way of inserting our way into the picture. Now, again here, if you look at it very well, it's supposed to be carved it around, but it's a flatness. There's a flatness about it. And they say that it is because when they're copying an image, they copy from a book, so it's flat. That is the normal explanation that they give from copying products. Probably. Now this is, again, a very lovely figure. And I remember, here we have the square. And what is atypical is the Niño is turned away. Normally, he should be looking this way. But here, the whole body is turned outwards. Is that significant? I do not know. But it's someone who did not follow the prescribed thing to copy, right? The artist being stronger than the model that he was being presented with. But this is particularly important because at her back, when you turn her around, unfortunately, when the picture was given to me, they didn't show me the back part, but I saw later, you would have one of the most distinctive trait of Philippine imagery of the Virgin Mary, which is Ricky Jose's suksok, tucked in skirt at the back. All right. I don't have that picture, but the next slide I can show you. All right. The suksok. Well, the first one who documented this was Margarita Stella from Spain. She wrote about it in 1972. We were not even aware of, well, we didn't have ivory statues here with that kind of tray. And then at the Agustinian Museo Oriental, they have 2 ivory images of the Nuestra Señora de la Correa. She's belted, and another one of Mary Stanley. And at the Victoria and Albert Museum, there is one particular statue of the Blessed Mother. But in every way, the face is Chinese feature. But lo and behold, when you turn her around, her skirt is tucked in. So, where did that image come from? Still a big mystery, although getting closer to it because the time element is there already. So, this is the substructure. There, here, and here. In Chinese figures, you will have in the immortals, but they will be wearing a sash. So naturally, you will have those lines. But in the Philippine context, you don't wear a sash. It's just that, for some reason, they put this. Later on, I will explain my own peculiar, when we have time, explanation for that, because that's not really a historical fact. This is now, again, from the same red. And here, you have a different posture, one of the earliest of the Immaculate Conception. But here, you see, whoever carved this does not understand what is happening, so that the attributes of the Virgin are just thrown helter-skelter around her. But in other figures here in the Philippines, in Paete in particular, we have a very beautiful carving where all of these images are distributed around here, having these attributes of the Virgin Mary. Okay? And this is what it's supposed to mean: tota pulchra est amica mea, et macula non est in te. I think it means, you are beautiful, my dearest, and without a flaw. So this is one of the earliest, again, image that we have of this particular period. This is another of the Virgin Mary holding a rosary. The rosary is also a feature of many of Buddhist carvings. And here is Saint Dominic receiving the rosary. This is Saint Catherine of Alexandria and Santa Lucia. That saucer is supposed to hold a replica of her eyes. So if you have eye problems, you can pray to her. I think this is a very beautiful one, very complete imagery of San Geronimo. And here I think this was dictated or probably watched over by someone because it's so correct. This, you see, this is San Geronimo, a hermit. There he is with his stone. This is standard because whenever he prays and tries to expiate his sin, he beats his chest with that stone. And this is the lion because he's supposed to be in the desert. There is the skull, contemplating death. Of course, there is the crucified Christ, the cloak and the hat of the cardinal. He is not one, but he translated the Latin Vulgate. So he's very important for that. And this is like a commentary. Why is God the Father there? It is because, apparently in a dream, Saint Jerome dreamt that God the Father talked to him. You do not pay attention to your prayers. You're more involved with your translation. So the storyline is so complete. Somebody must have been telling them how to do this. But you find the same one in Mexico, in the collection of Doña Lidia Sada, and many in the Calavera book from from Portugal. You have examples of this, and there is Saint Anthony, Santa Clara, they're related always, and San Francisco. This is so debased, so I cannot really efface. Sorry, I cannot identify who it is. This is again San Francisco receiving the stigmata, and there the famous Chinese clouds, which has become incorporated into our local tradition. Now, this is a bit controversial. You see this portion. This is very Chinese from the Immortal series, right? But here she is not wearing it. This is Kuan Yin, because apparently between the 3rd and the 7th century, he was a male, okay? But towards the evolution of the Kuan Yin imagery, it became transformed into a female, and it was known as the Goddess of Mercy. And she is portrayed with a child. Now, we are always taught that everything have been appropriated from the Chinese. But in this particular case, the imagery of Kuan Yin was derived from the Virgin Mary as mother and child. And this obviously still might have been carved by a Chinese artisan, except for this particular element. It has come down to us more of influence from the Indian, from the Filipinos who wear their hair loose. In all of the Kuan Yin figures, the little child is bald, and her hair is always pulled back. But in later ivory images, you will find that the hair is always there in different presentation. This is from the Tehua ware. You say Tehua or Tehua ware? 18th century exports. Unmistakably Chinese product, but the angel here will show you that she's meant to represent the Virgin, and that is Saint Anthony with the child Jesus. So there is a very great facility for the Chinese to accommodate other cultures, but for trade. But they're very, very good in doing this. This is from the Philippines, again from the this is 17th century. And you see the same flatness, the bend here because of the ivory task. The three markings on the neck, and now you will have the snake curled around the globe, and this is supposed to be representative of the moon. She is beautiful as the moon and bright as the sun. So she is This relates to her image as the Immaculate Conception. In the Philippines, when you see this and the snake, that would be the Immaculate Conception. This is 17th century again, but again, you see here the fold. Margarita Stella would say that this is characteristic of Chinese carvings. But these things persist through the centuries, since it's essentially a copyist craft. You're given a model, and you have to copy it. But variations exist, and the cloud pattern here is just that, no longer as elaborate as the other ones. Look at the faces, they're all alike. And this is one of the gems in the Intramuros Administration collection. This is from the collection of the Museo Oriental. This is where you have the suksuk pattern at the back also. Now this was found here. It belonged to the family of a rich sugar plain family, sugar family. They have a plantation in Guagua, and you obviously have this is all ivory, yeah? The carving here is ivory, like lace network here. Who carved it, we do not know at this point. It's here, we used it, it's ours. And this is now how, when you appropriate the retablo of the churches into the homes. And you have here the Nuestra Señora de la Leche. This imagery was banned during the Council of Trent because she was bearing her breast, right? But here are only archangels surrounding her, and of course, the local carvings incorporated into one thing. So, what I would like to say, even in pre-industrial societies, globalization was already at work. And it is amazing how, in their interactions and exchanges, individual societies manage to keep their ethnic identities intact. Thank you very much.
The study of Philippines art is closely linked to the creation of the Transpacific route of the Manila Galleon, which from 1565 until 1850 transported delicate pieces from Asia to the new Hispanic and Spanish port, and vice versa. The Hispanic Transpacific Ivories were protagonists of this cultural exchange. This sculpture had been widely studied before by Mrs. Esperanza Gatbonton and Regalado Trota here. Here in Philippines, Beatriz Sanchez Navarro in Mexico, and Margarita Estela Marcos in Spain. Thanks for inspiring my worship. By the way, just out the last issue of Perro Verde, a Filipino cultural publication in Spanish with a short paper on ivories in Andalusia. I want to thank you to the Spanish Embassy for the support provided. Here is Ms. Meishel Parale. Thank you for everything. The Manila Galleon was excellent for the progress of the evangelization of the territory. Different religious orders sponsored the building of churches that needed liturgical furniture appropriate for the ceremonies. Chinese artists were in charge of providing these goods to the religious. So, Hernando Richter said in this document in the 16th century, relación muy cierta y verdadera de lo que ahora nuevamente se ha sabido de las nuevas islas del Poniente y descubrimiento que dicen de la China, the goods that the first Chinese ships brought under the Spanish government were adapted to the religious taste. Here you have a brief paragraph. The Chinese artists started to make pieces to the European taste, inspired by models that the Spanish brought, but with Oriental reminiscences for the artists. So, the Manila colony was formed with people known as the Sanglays, who started the production of these pieces in Philippines. The governor, Gonzalo Ronquillo Peñalosa, ordered the construction of the first variant in 1581 to give a base to the Sanglays. But this was not the only one. Up to 4 of these were revived as a absolute fire. Here you can see in this slide different variants as well as the years of construction. 1, 2, 3, 4, before the construction of the Alcaicería de San Fernando. Fray Domingo de Salazar refers to this variant and to the goods in this letter list of the 16th century, previously mentioned by Mrs. Gatbonton, but I have in the original language in Spanish. Los oficios mecánicos de los españoles han cesado todos, porque todos se visten y calzan con sangleyes, por ser muy buenos oficiales al uso de España, y hacen todo muy barato, así lo pincel como en lo de bulto. Han sacado maravillosas piezas y algunos niños Jesús que yo he visto en marfil. Because of this letter, we know of the production of the sculptures painted Ivory by the Sanglays, and it's confirmed that the Spanish brought their own models and European goods. But in this report of 17th century by Pedroche, we can see how these Chinese craftsmen became instructors for the native. Escultores, carpinteros, canteros, serradores y otros semejantes todo el día de hoy son mestizos e indios. Y si hay algunos chinos, son cabecillas que hacen las obras con indios y a poca costa suya se llevan el dinero ajeno. Y absolutamente no hay oficio o arte que no lo sepan los naturales, con lo que se ve claro cuán poca falta hacen y cuánto daño ocasionan. So now I'd like to explain the aesthetic evolution of this sculpture depending on the chronology. Starting with the Oriental look, this normally appears in the 17th century Ivories, highlighting the standard eyes, flat nose, light necks, and logos. We can see this in crucified crease, especially in the crease, like this one, very similar to the UST crease in Seville, in Palacio de Lebrija. We have more examples. In this case, we can compare one crucifix crease in Santillana del Mar, Cantabria, with other in a private collection of Lidia Sada in Mexico. Another one, for example, is this in Museo Nacional del Virreinato, and this is my preferred in Museo Diocesano de Pamplona. And it's on one Immaculada Concepción with these characteristics, long lobulus, line legs, all oriental characteristics Ms. Gatbonton explained before. This is common also in some saints like this San Juan Bautista and San Miguel from Badajoz Cathedral. This is a legacy donated by Juan Vargas Hurtado, Captain of the city of Manila in 1682. It's very big sculpture. This one and this San Miguel, you can look the very Chinese drawing. And the saints related to different religious orders like San Francisco de Asís and some female representation such as Santa Rosa de Lima or the Virgin of Guadalupe. Here you can compare both sculptures of Santa Rosas, one in Granada, I forget to put, Santa Rosa de Lima and Archimuseo de San Juan de Dios, Casa López, Granada, Spain, with this one, this head in Intramuros administration. And this is Virgen de Guadalupe. It is very interesting because it's how the iconographies travel again, not only the sculpture. Not so usual are the sculpture groups, although some exceptions can be found, such as the Calvary Nativities and the Holy Family. Here we can see an interesting new group of ivory sculpture, like this Holy Family, in a private collection in Seville, and compared with other that keep in the Ayala collection. Next, the European influence frequently in Ivories from the mid-17th and 18th century, the impact of the arrival of sculpture from Flanders in the 16th century, made by the Malinas workshop at the Santo Niño de Cebo. This gave typical elements to Hispanic-Philippine ivories, such as mosaic, cliff florid hat, and small eyes. In the same century, Rome prints circulated that painted model of an Indian miniature, which served as a model for an Hispanic-Philippine ivory clay. So this is a very interesting example of how the circulation of the images. Here you can see the miniature Indian on the left, here, made by Hispanic European print made in Rome in 1580, and the other one compared with the plate of Hispanic-Philippine ivories. But you can see the same influence in plates of Canton and Goa, keeping the British Museum and Victoria and Albert Museum. But we can't forget the relevance of the Andalusian sculptural school in the Hispanic-Philippine ivories, mainly focused on Juan Martínez Montañez. We can find images of Niño Jesús bendiciendo, similar to the reference sculpture of him in the center of the slide, in Seville Cathedral. The quantity of the sculpture of this time is mainly because one copy comes back to Ternate in the Philippines from Acapulco in 17th century. Besides, some modern shine following the Montañez model of San Ponce Chapel in Seville, in the center of the slide, has its reference in ivory. This can serve mainly in the way in which a model cures the baby's foot and embraces him with the other arm. Although we can see the Murillo influence in the model of Inmaculada Concepción, on the words fair with the center and the moon tutu in a very dynamic composition. During the 19th century, the pieces reduced their size, and wings, glass eyes, fake lashes, and sometimes superimposed the silver long cloth were added. Some of the most characteristic pieces from this time were the virinas, individual sculpture of sculptural groups inside glass galleries. They were sculptured with the face and hat of ivory and the body made by wood, like this Servando and San Germán, donated from Philippines to Cadiz Cathedral in 1851. Ruiz mentioned this sculpture in his Noli Me Tangere, and in other books in the 18th century, but I shoot this. Oculta por una cortina de seda, conduce a una pequeña capilla oratorio que no debe faltar en ninguna casa filipina. Allí se ven imágenes de la Sacra Familia con el busto y las extremidades de marfil, ojos de cristal, larga pestaña y cabellera rubia rizada, figuras de la escultura de Santa Cruz. Next, let's look at some of the legacies from the Philippines during the 18th century. First, we can outline the figure of Manuel Silvestre Pérez del Camino, originally from the Rioja village of Castellanes de Rioja, who had an expensive career as a state worker in the Viceroyalty of New Spain. He made a donation to buy a chapel in his home village in the 18th century to consolidate his family prestige. Now, the chapel has a small altarpiece in the slide preceded by the painting with the Virgen de Guadalupe, signed by Miguel Cabrera. However, the most interesting ornament in this chapel for our study are ivory sculpture, of course. Of them, the Virgen del Rosario, San Miguel, and San Jose, and the Virgin of the Holy Family set were sold by the Paris priest. So now, in the Diocesan Museum in Calahorra, they have the sculptures of San Juan Bautista, San Fernando, and the Niño Jesús of the Holy Family. You can see in the center of the slide the reconstruction of where were these sculptures, this San Fernando and San Juan Bautista. Another interesting legacy is the San Francisco de Samaniego Tuesta. There is not too much information available, but we can see he was born in 1568 in Caicedo de Yuso, Álava, and died in 1670 in Manila. So there was a delayed interpretation of properties from Philippines to Spain, given that the reference date for this was 1783. The content of this decree not only allows us analysis the pieces that Francisco de Samaniego donated to his native village, ivory crucifix, a silver sacred receptacle, and a silver cross that currently is missing. It's also revealed that the legacy arrived in the Galeón Asunción de Cádiz, as well as its valuation. With respect to the crucifix, in the decree were mentioned this measure and description like in the slide, and that is location in a chapel near to the shore of Nuestra Señora de la Asunción, that is now in ruins. You can see que el presente viene como el crucifijo de este expediente, es de marfil, su largo desde la coronilla de la cabeza hasta el dedo pulgar del pie derecho tiene 20 pulgadas. It is very interesting documented in Civil Archive. Its features have a European influence that can be particularly appreciated in the eyes and nose, but the most interesting part of this sculpture is the description that has been kept on the right foot, unusual in the Hispanic-Philippine ivories, given that these models are normally anonymous. You can see the description of the foot. On the left, you can see other similar example in Colegio de la Vizcaína in Mexico. I think this is for the maker, because not for the owner, because at the last only I can see fluid. So maybe if you know other ivory, tell me please. Okay. From Granada we can study spectacular ivory, the Virgen del Pilar in San Antón Convent. María Ignacia de Alzor, daughter of Marqueses de Aguayo y Santalaya, devotee of the Virgen del Pilar, founded around the mid-18th century the temple and convent of Nuestra Señora del Pilar in Mexico, for the education of girls from all social conditions. Analyzing the historic chronicle of this convent, we found some curious information. The founder's mother had a friendship with an Aragonese lady that possesses one Virgen del Pilar of ivory made in China by a sangre. When he finished this sculpture, he liked it so much that he became a Christian. When María Ignacia contemplated the sculpture, she was also captivated, and the owner decided to donate it to her after her death. But her husband didn't satisfy her wishes, and he took it to Spain. Before he died, he showed it to María Ignacia for the last time, and she told him that he will be punished for taking the Virgin with him. Her words became true when this man went through some calamities until his death, and he stipulated in his will that the Virgin sculpture will go back to the convent. Therefore, our hypothesis is that after the secularization of this system in the 19th century, the Virgin was taken by one of them to Granada. Regarding the Hispanic-Philippine ivory, we can see clearly the deep profusion of decoration on the Virgin cloth, mainly the floral elements, stripy band, and star. The Virgen del Pilar is placed on a pedestal decorated with a floral motif and a central cross, both made in ivories. This sculpture is exceptional because of its naturalism, unusual in this style. We only need to observe how the child looks at this model while grabs her robe to catch her attention. We can compare these figures with the Virgen del Niño Perdido, conserved in Gaudí and Castellón, Spain, although this model is more archaic as it was donated in the 17th century. Finally, I want to show my most recent reshaping progress in working to analyze the composition of ivory and polychrome of an Immaculada Concepción, donated in the 18th century and donated by Don Juan de Osorio Crespo from Mexico to Illora in Granada, where he was born. Unfortunately, it was destroyed in the Spanish Civil War, but this has given us more facilities for a chemical analysis. On the left, you can see how maybe was this Immaculada Concepción. Thank you so much. Salamat.
Thank you so much to both speakers for informing us about this really important tradition, and one that's so quintessentially linked to the Trans-Pacific interchange. I just wanted to note a few interesting topics that have come up, and in some cases that were in the written papers, but I think something that could be sort of brought up maybe also in discussion. And these are the issues regarding tradition and innovation, and I think it's really interesting to see where innovation occurs. So on the one hand, we have these influences coming from the outside, but then, as Esperanza indicated, there's also a lot of indigenous agency, for example, here in the Philippines, in terms of artistic production and innovation, where they bring in their own motifs. And you spoke about that a little bit more directly in your paper, where you've located some of this innovation, not necessarily just in, let's say, Spain or China, where some of these influences came, but also locally in popular culture. And I'm hoping that maybe you'll speak a little bit more about that in this discussion. Another topic is, of course, hybridity, and just the name itself, Hispano-Sino-Filipino Ivories, indicates that this incredibly complex and hybrid tradition, and this is a question that we're very familiar with also in Mexico, with a number of different artistic traditions. And I always like to, when I talk about this topic with my students, bring up this really seminal article, Hybridity and Its Discontent by Damon Gibson and Carolyn Dean, where although at a certain moment, at the moment of encounter, I think it's maybe useful to trace where these different influences come from, at some point this type of inquiry breaks down because they become so melded. And both of you brought up the Salazar quote, where we learn that the local craftsmen became so good at imitating foreign techniques that they were indistinguishable from their original model. And so we can't really, maybe at some point, pinpoint anymore who are the makers, and the identity of the makers are no longer visible traces in the artworks themselves. So maybe this is something else that we can discuss more. And of course, we're very familiar with this issue currently, and this brings up the topic again that we reached yesterday with art, or is it art? Is it a commodity? You know, everybody has their iPhone, right, or a version of it, and to me, this is beautiful artwork too. But it's a commodity that is designed in the U.S. The materials, raw materials, are coming from the Congo. These objects are assembled in China and consumed around the world. So what do these have to say about our identities, either as makers or as users? So these are just some thoughts, and perhaps I'll invite the speakers up so they can answer some of the questions from the audience. And if you feel inclined to address any of these topics, I would especially love to hear more about how popular culture comes in and is a source of immigration. How popular culture is the source of immigration.
Okay. Actually, we really do not know. For me, this was my own interpretation because sometime back, I think Ricky, you were the one who started calling it sok-sok. And sitting around, we would discuss, what does that really mean? How did that come about? And since I was the female in the group, I said, you know, they always talk about, you don't have a scarf, but you have a long gown, you have a see-through. Okay, see-through, it should be a square, see-through, they will do this. Oh my goodness. Here, right? So that it's like a strong effect, you always have this here. But the mystery is, you see, they should be wide, very wide, long, covering your head. Everywhere they went, apparently, they had this long cover, maybe for the sun. But when they enter the house, they tear. They can't have to tear because it's going to fall. You know, the other one is already back this way. So what are you going to do with it? So I thought maybe, just maybe, you have the cover, and the best thing would be like young people would just tie it around the waist, right? They're in the jackets. It would just snap it behind the back. So when you're going out again, you simply take it and cover your head again. That was the way I look at it. And, well, the boys in the group said, yeah, that makes some sense. Like I say, it's not historically proven. That's how it came about. But if you really look at it, why would they put the thing at the back? There's no belt. There's nothing. So why would they tuck that in? But in other things, what is in the Nino, for instance, I doubt very much that our local carvers read the passage from the Indian document, because down the line from India, from Goa, it was just copied, and we just it's a fat child. I guess a fat child is cute. So, but if you look at the Flemish carvings of the Christ child, it's more like, well, based on a human child, not a toy child. So, but the thing that I could not go into was the interchange between the Filipino Chinese and the Chinese in China, the carvers, because the trade centers beside Canton, for the first time, I think that was 1580 something, 85, that you started, according to Derek Gilman. He read a critic, Chinese, from a Chinese source, he didn't say the source, that they started carving figurines of the immortals, okay? That was one. But nothing else. We cannot prove that that is where it started, copying for Kuan Yin and for the local trade. However, in 1662, there was another one, from the Shangzhou list of trade goods. They said they were carving figurines. So at that point, I think we can start with the Chinese influence because of the actual carvers were Chinese. And funnily enough, Derek Gilman says, the Kuan Yin figures have narrowed eyes because they were copied from the Philippine models produced here. So I thought, how strange. The Chinese in China and the Chinese in the Philippines, they would have the same features, okay? But the other thing that they always noted is the way the eyes, the nose, the mouth are kind of configured together, very closely spaced. But Filipinos, big eyes, flaring nose, nostrils, as Margarita would say, and quite full lips. So this now become, I think it moves away from the actual models, and they started doing it the way they did it. For me, the more mistakes the sculptors make, I like. I find it more appealing and more personal, okay? And in ivory itself, because maybe it is expensive, it would always be commissioned. So it's kind of dictated to you what you have to do. Whereas in Philippines, I like the wood ones because there you really have the carver's personality, belief coming through, it shows. But at the time of 1585 of Salazar, which for some reason Derek Gilman of the Victoria and Albert Museum says the actual text was suggesting that the carving was done in China. But when Salazar was writing the text, he was talking about the Parian. So for me, he was talking about the local carvers in the Parian. The other thing which makes it difficult for me to believe that at those early they were importing from China because it was banned, although there were ways of doing it, but from the time that Lima Hong came in 1574, and then Gomez Perez das Marinas was killed in 1593. The next year there was a massacre of the Chinese residents. The following year there was an uprising. The next year the son of Gomez Perez das Marinas was killed, but before he died he says, you should expel all the Chinese. And Morgan himself expelled about 12,000 of them. So there was this constant, every year upheaval against the Chinese. So I do not think that they would be spending this time commissioning work of ivory in China itself. I think perhaps through Macau, but Macau itself is getting it from Fujian. So there was a time, I can't remember exactly, when the Kuxinga rebels were in command of the Fujian coast, so they couldn't travel out. And also in the record of the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción galleon, which also sank. There you didn't find ivory, but you found a lot of gold. And it said there that the Chinese were getting gold out of China, bringing it to the Philippines to be fashioned here by, I think, Chinese craftsmen. And the people of the interregional trade brings it out to the Malabar coast, to whichever factotum they want to give it to. It's very popular because of bribery. They cannot enter without permits, right? So that was being used. So there are a lot of conflicting views and documents that we have to sift through to find out what this is. But for me, the most important thing is, for every carver, Chinese, Filipino, Indian, there was always some element of themselves that they put in. And I think the mistake of most Filipinos is that we are so clever at detecting what is Chinese here, what is Spanish here, what is Goanese here. For heaven's sake, where is the Filipino there? I think for us researchers must now come to terms with what we have. For instance, the Escuelas de las Artes, Bellas Artes did not come about until 1856. So all the foreign influences, they have models from Donatello, they have models from Bernini, they have, all European models. That came much later. And the few things that came from Spain, Martinez Montañez, those are very rare. I do not know if I should look at it as a setback that we did not get the important ivory carvers from Spain or from the other region to come here to carve, or I should look at it as a blessing because somehow we were able to make art for ourselves, developing a foreign idea. It must be very hard for them to think of, well, like the Santo Niño, who is this little figure here? And they will adapt him, and all those curly hair and all that. But the Filipinos never use the curly hair, what they call the crown of snails. They never used it. It was always just the natural curls. So other motifs that they would just appropriate here and there, I think we have to search where was the source, how was it developed locally. That I still have to see here. So other elements.